Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. This video is going to be my Geekly Wrap-Up for the week of January 27th through February 2nd. This week I managed to read, how many books did I read? I read 5 books and I listened to 2 audiobooks. I didn't manage to play any new board games, but I have been playing a lot of video games, so I will tell you a little bit about those towards the end of the video. So the first book that I read this week was Tightrope by Amanda Quick. This was the pick for the romance book club that I have been trying out doing, and like a lot of her romance books, this is part of a series, but you don't have to have read any of the earlier books in the series. And this is about a woman named Amelie. She's living in the 1930s, and she used to be a trapeze artist in a circus, but the Great Depression has closed down her circus. So she decides that she's going to go reinvent herself in Hollywood by being like a hotel owner for famous stars. I don't know how that's gonna make her more money in the Great Depression, but whatever, that's not the point of the book. And then she meets this man named Matthias who has sort of an uncanny, almost psychic-like intuition when they're brought together because one of the stars that's staying at her hotel gets murdered by a robot in the middle of his magician act. This is a weird-ass book. I had never read anything by Amanda Quick before, so I was interested because I knew her name. Her books are kind of everywhere. They're the kind of books that you see in, like, Walmart, and I feel like everybody's grandparents have a stash of these kind of books in, like, their house or whatever. So I knew who this author was, but I had never read anything by her. I didn't really know what to expect, but this was not it. So whatever I thought was going to happen, that kind of went totally out the window because this turns into sort of a romantic suspense murder mystery that I thought was going to be more suspenseful and romantic than it actually was, and it didn't really seem like it was either of those things. I don't know, like, there was nothing necessarily wrong with the way that it was written, except for the fact that the entire premise of the story kind of failed to get me to buy into it. So I didn't enjoy it as maybe I was expecting, but again, the writing was fine. So I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5. I feel like if I had nothing else to read, I would probably pick up another one of these books in the series. Like if I was at, stranded on an airplane or something like that, or in a waiting room somewhere, I'd read another one of these if it was available. But I don't know that I'm necessarily gonna go out of my way to seek them out, if that makes sense. So I have book club tomorrow where we're gonna be announcing the book that we'll read for February. Hopefully it's better than Tightrope was. Okay, then I have another book that I read in like a marathon session because I was still feeling really sick and I was like laid up on the couch. And that was Brave Face, a memoir, How I Survived Growing Up, Coming Out, and Depression by Sean David Hutchinson. This is a memoir of a well-known young adult author who I didn't realize had so many things in common with me. Like, he's, got maybe like 15 years older than I am, something like that, but there are a lot of parallels between our stories of being like young, extremely closeted queer kids growing up in Florida, desperately wanting to escape Florida, having somewhat like thwarted ambitions of acting and stuff like that, and also going through some really deep, dark mental health shit. So this book actually comes with trigger warnings for all of the things: suicide attempts, self-harm, a lot of like homophobia, both internalized and just from like external people in his life. So yeah, maybe don't read that if you are not in a good headspace to deal with that kind of subject matter because it doesn't really hold back any punches. But I really enjoyed this book. I thought that it was a very insightful memoir. I always appreciate like when people that write memoirs don't shy away from really getting into the meat of the Someone is just screaming outside. What the heck? I appreciate when memoir writers don't really shy away from talking about the more uncomfortable and cringy parts of their lives, so I appreciated that this memoir really did kind of engage with those things. Okay, then I finished the Nameless City trilogy, which is a graphic novel trilogy by Faith Erin Hicks. This is the third book, The Divided Earth, so I'm not going to tell you very much about this because I've talked about it and it is the end of a trilogy, so spoilers. But this was one of the first series I've read in a long time where I've given every installment in the series 5 out of 5 stars. Because it was just firing on all cylinders from start to finish. This was absolutely fantastic. The conclusion was very satisfying, very suspenseful. Like, it's actually hard to, I think, carry over like this much suspense and especially this much character growth over a visual trilogy. And I really loved the way that Faith Erin Hicks did this. This is the kind of writer that I want to be someday. Okay. I also read another sequel, The Night Country by Melissa Albert. This was one of my most anticipated releases of this last month, January. Wait, was it January or did this come out already? I don't remember. This is what happens when you get sick and you don't know what you're doing. So again, not going to tell you too many details about this book because it is a sequel, so if you're interested, just go read the first book in the series. But suffice to say, there are a lot more escapades in fictional realms. There is a whole other fictional place called the Night Country that various characters have to explore, and it contains some murder mystery, scary dark fairy tale elements, which I adored. And I didn't like this book as much as I liked the Hazelwood. I feel like a lot of the big plot twist surprise type things had already happened in the first book, so when the same sort of plot twist surprises would happen in the sequel, I was like, oh, well, she already kind of did that in the first book, so it was perhaps less surprising and less impactful than it otherwise would be. But I still thought it was really good. Gave it 4 out of 5. The last book that I read this week is Compass South by Hope Larson and illustrated by Rebecca Mock. This is another one of the books that Sean got me for Christmas this year, and it is the first in a duology. It is about these 12-year-old twins who are named Alex and Cleopatra, and they have these treasured family heirlooms, a pocket watch, and a little like pocket knife that they have been told they need to hold onto at all costs. Then somebody comes looking for those things, claiming that these like family heirlooms actually contain a map to a hidden treasure. And so the twins have to sort of go on the run to escape the people that are trying to hunt them down. This is like a sort of classic adventure on the high seas story. It takes place in the late 1800s, I believe, and they have to sort of go on this ship and sailing adventure around the Horn of South America to islands in the Pacific, etc. And I love stories that are about ships. I love stories that are about gender disguise and adventures. So I'm really enjoying this. I think I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 just because there were some elements to the story that I think could have been fleshed out a bit better, but I'm really enjoying reading it, and I've already started reading the second book in the duology. Okay, so then I did 2 audiobooks this week. One of them was Hurricane Child by Kaysen Callender, which I did because I have my goal to read 30 books by Black authors this year. I didn't love that book as much as I thought I would. It's a queer middle grade story about this girl named Caroline who lives on a place called Water Island, which is near St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and she's kind of coming to terms with her sexuality while also trying to deal with the fact that her mother has sort of up and left the family without any explanation, and she really misses her mother. And then this new girl moves to the island, and Caroline starts to sort of have feelings with her, and then that butts up against the fact that she is very lonely, and homosexuality is not really accepted at all where she lives, and all the other girls in her class are bullying her and making fun of her. I enjoyed the elements of this that had to do with like folklore and mythology, because Caroline can sort of see these spirits or different like folkloric figures and stuff like that. But overall, this book, for such a short book, had an extremely repetitive writing style, and that just didn't sit well with me. Like, I understand wanting to drive home the fact that Caroline really is focused on the fact that she misses her mother and she feels really lonely. But I feel like you've got to vary the way you say that, because otherwise, and this makes me sound like such a dick for saying it, but it really makes her just come across as like a whiny little child. I'm like, of course you would be whiny because you're 12 and your mom is gone and like you don't know what to do. But I'll just say that like the experience of reading that as a fiction was not altogether very pleasant for me. But I do think that it's important that this book exists. I think it's the first time that I've ever read like a queer middle grade book that has a black girl as the protagonist and it's not set in the United States. So that was obviously very good and important for, you know, representation of like the African diaspora and of like Caribbean culture and things like that. But I don't know, I didn't really get along with it that well, which is a shame, I suppose. And then the last book that I listened to this week was The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater, which is the second book in the Raven cycle because, hello, in case you didn't know, somehow I have managed to be almost 26 years old and not read the Raven cycle at all, so I am taking my time listening to them on audiobook. I really loved The Dream Thieves a lot. It mostly follows my favorite character, Ronan, and I feel like I need to make a separate video about like why this character is my favorite character, because there are so many things about him that like I don't like it when people are like that in real life. But they also resonate with me so deeply as an individual, where I'm just like, you're being such a like teenage boy shithead, but like I was like that too, and I remember what it was like to be that angry and like that full of rage and totally unable to express the depth of my strong emotions in a healthy way. Obviously, I wasn't really responding to that by pulling cars out of dreams so that I could race people on the street with them. Shocker, I know. But I really, really resonate with that character, and I'm just sort of making my way through the Raven cycle blissfully and enjoying Will Patton's narration on the audiobooks very, very much. Okay, like I said, I didn't end up playing any board games this week. I don't really know what happened, but I just didn't. But I have been playing a lot of video games. I have been playing a crap ton of Animal Crossing New Leaf because I'm super excited for Animal Crossing New Horizons, which is coming out on March 20th. Not that I'm counting down the days or anything. Not that I haven't been anticipating this since forever. But I am really enjoying playing New Leaf, just sort of like continuing to develop my little town and everything. And I really love the Animal Crossing games. They're some of my favorite games ever. And then I've also been playing a lot more of The Outer Worlds, which is this sort of big open world sci-fi adventure RPG. So it starts with a sort of typical character creation. You are the like sole survivor of a cryostasis ship that got lost in space, and now you're waking up 70 years or something like that after you were supposed to wake up originally, because you were supposed to be in like the first wave of colonists in this new solar system that humans are living in, but really now you're just, you know, like everybody else, and the world has kind of moved on and had its problems and its issues, etc. So what I'm playing is that, and the game is definitely like more streamlined in terms of story and quests than like a typical open world game, so it's not as like open and broad as something like Skyrim or The Witcher 3 or anything like that. But the reason why I wanted to bring it up in this video is because the game is super well written. I have created a character that basically has all of my points in my speech skills, so like my persuasion, lying, intimidation, and then I have some other points in like leadership skills and stuff. So like almost an entirely charisma-based player. And my favorite part of the game is just sitting down and like reading a really long conversation that I'm having with some of the NPCs. There's a sort of like important moral quandary where you have to make a decision in order to progress the game that comes like right at the end of the opening act of the game. And the story is so well written and the choice is actually so complex and not that straightforward that I actually just sat there with my thumb over the controller button for 10 minutes, literally like talking my way through what decision I was going to make. It was like, wow, I can't remember the last time a video game presented me with a moral choice, and it actually was a hard moral choice to make. It wasn't just like, I don't know, like there are often games that set you up to make these choices and they're like, it's such a hard choice, but it's really not. Like there's obviously a good choice and a bad choice. This one, they both had such strong elements of good and bad and would have consequences for the entire playthrough of the rest of the game, that it was really hard for me to just sit there and pick something, and I couldn't do it, and Sean was laughing at me because I kept talking myself into doing one thing, and then I'd talk myself back out of it and talk myself into doing the other thing. The other thing I really love about this game is that it has great queer representation. It's the first time in a sort of big AAA video game title, number one, that I have ever encountered an NPC that is canonically ace. So one of the companions that you can have come along with you in the game is canonically asexual. She has a quest line where that comes up and you can talk about it, and it's also the only other AAA game I have ever played where the player character gets a dialogue option to also specifically be asexual. So the NPC will be talking to you and she'll be saying something like, oh, I really like this girl, but I don't really enjoy physical intimacy and all of that kind of thing. What if she doesn't like me back or something? And you can have the option to just like say, you know, you can reassure her, or you can do what I did, which is say, well, like, that's fine. Like, physical intimacy is fine for some people, but it isn't everything in a relationship, so if it's important to you, go for it. But there's also a player character dialogue option that's like, I know what you mean, I feel the same way. And it isn't just a throwaway line either. It's actually, like, handled with nuance, and it very much feels authentic. Like, I don't know if they actually had an ace person writing that dialogue, but it mirrors many conversations that I have had with friends who are ace or demisexual, and I'm just like, oh, wow, this was the first time I'd ever seen something like that in a video game. And it also existed as a proactive choice on the part of the writers. It wasn't just, oh, well, this character isn't romanceable, therefore we're just going to retroactively say that's because they're ace. First of all, that's not how asexuality works. Plenty of ace folks are into romance as well. And second of all, it's just nice to see that this is actually handled well and well written. So that's The Outer Worlds. I'm having a really great time just going around and whacking murderous robots on the head with a giant electrified stick. I'm having a really great time with all of the companion quests. They go way above and beyond just simple, like, fetching quests and stuff like that into the kind of questions that you always hope the best video games will answer. Not to get too deep, but it's a game about the meaning of life. All right, so that is gonna do it for this week's Geekly Wrap-Up. Leave me a comment down below if you've read any of these books or played either of these games. Also, if you play Animal Crossing, let me know, because I'm going to want to make friends with people when we get our islands made for New Horizons, and then we can go visit each other's little houses, and it'll be so cute and adorable, and I can't wait. It's gonna be so good. So if you liked what you saw here and you want to see more of what I do, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, because that is the best way to get updates every time I post. As always, thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!